Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And welcome to everybody online. We're still piling in. It's one of those, what a way to end April, but April showers. We got one more day till May. Welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Dan Tinen, and I'm delighted to be your worship leader this morning, and we're grateful to have everybody here today. In this congregation, we believe it's up to each of us to reach out to make sure that everyone feels welcome. So please look around the sanctuary and welcome or greet those who are with us this morning. And Frank, would you say who's online for us?
Yes, we have Russ, Gary, Emma, Betsy, Christine, Bill, Ashley, and Ellen.
About as many people online as we do in the sanctuary. So there's a reason we invested in all this stuff that Frank is taking care of for us this morning. Good morning. We also, in your order of worship, there are important announcements. I think we were a little scanty on that. Next week, Kirsten will be, who is the executive director, right, of the Stone Soup Cafe, which, you know, feeds people here in Greenfield on every Saturday lunch. And she'll be speaking about hunger in America, food justice for all. And Rocky just came up with a notice about a week from today, but at 3 o'clock, the Franklin County Community Chorus will have their annual spring concert at 3 o'clock in the Greenfield High School auditorium. And this is directed by Paul Kalkari, who was the director of choruses at Greenfield High for many, many years, and he's a wonderful director, and they always put on a wonderful concert. Okay. Now, after the service, we do have, it doesn't look like it, but we actually have the coffee maker sort of hidden in the minister's office, and we bring that out. And so hang around after the service. We've got tea and coffee and a couple of goodies, looks like, huh? Got some donuts or something? If you have questions about Unitarian Universalism or All Souls, feel free to speak with any of us. And you can find information in the pamphlets in the front entrance. And if you're a new visitor here, please sign the guest book and we'll say hello to you. And now, I invite everyone, especially myself, to breathe deeply, come into this room, be present, be at peace, be focused. In the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and seek communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Let's take this time for quiet reflection as we listen in silence to Julia Beatty play the prelude. was beautiful, flawless. And now will you please join me in reading our chalice lighting words? As happens in every Unitarian Universalist church this morning across the United States. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. And now, I realize I didn't introduce myself. My name's Dan Tinen, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of this church. I've been a member of All Souls since 1998, but I am a lay person. I didn't go through the rigorous several years of postgraduate study and internships and psychological testing that are required for a Unitarian Universalist minister. So my opinions are my own, and there is no implied consent given by this congregation or the Unitarian Universalist Association. But today is about Pollyanna versus Eeyore, and I thought we'd start out with one of our happiest hymns, number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come On. Please rise in body and spirit as you're able to join with us. And come in, enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Joyful day, enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. 4. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change.
And
Today
move the dishes.
will be
Do
a
that stuff.
joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
The dress get cleaned up. If the servants go, the dress gets cleaned up. Let's knock off a little.
Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. And now, will you please join in reading the Congregational Covenant that we have composed over the last year or so. In this house, we covenant with one another to listen respectfully with an open mind and value our diversity as a source of our communal strength, to learn together and grow together, generously sharing our time, talents, and treasures, to celebrate the joys of discovery, embracing the fullest measure of our humanity from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is. Every week in our church, we take up an offering, which gives us an opportunity to exercise the generosity of spirit that supports All Souls and its many ministries. And while I was sitting here, I was thinking about these wonderfully carved gargoyles. This church was built in 1894 and it has some spectacular woodwork, and some amazing work above the ceiling that you can't see. It's basically like a big railroad trestle up there holding up the roof. And someone asked me a couple weeks ago, what are these gargoyles for? Usually the gargoyles are on the outside of the church to keep the evil spirits out. And here it seems like they're trying to keep the evil spirits in.
Right.
And I said, well, no, I think they just liked them so much they didn't want them to get damaged in the rain because they'd spent so much money on them. So in that spirit, we see this act of giving, of growing more generous in our hearts and our actions as essential to our spiritual well-being. So we'll now receive this morning's offering, if I can find the plates, which I think are... You got them? Okay. Individually and together, we're building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. And each one of you, by your commitment of time, talent, and treasure, helps make that grand vision real. We appreciate your gifts. And I'd like to us to join together in a responsive reading. It's in the back of your hymnal, number 556. It was written by one of our Unitarian sages, Ralph Waldo Emerson's. And you'll read the words in italics. These roses under my window make no reference to former roses or to better ones. They are for what they are. They exist with God today. Before a leaf bud has burst, its whole life acts. In the full-blown flower, there is no more. In the leafless root, there is no less. But we postpone or remember. We do not live in the present, but with reverted eye lament the past, or heedless of the riches that surround us, stand on tiptoe to foresee the future. We cannot be happy or strong until we too live with nature in the present above time. Another optimistic hymn is next, number 138, These Things Shall Be. Please rise as you're willing and able. What a world we live in. We're all well aware of the bad things that the future could hold for us, and we dwell on them a little too much, I think. You've all heard about the power of positive thinking, right? It doesn't have a very good reputation with us. Positive thinking isn't a method of thought that smart, aware, thinking people put much stock in. Books like Think and Grow Rich or The Secret make positivity into a magic wand that cures everything. We know that positive thinking by an individual isn't some magic potion that can stop wars or cure poverty. On the other hand, our visions, or collective visions of the future, are so dark and dismal. I'm talking about television shows, movies, podcasts, newspaper articles, that too many of us have come to think as the only possible future as being an endless apocalypse. Of course, it's human nature to pay more attention to potential dangers than to good things. That was hammered into us by eons of evolution. But it's also blinding us to a lot of the good things that have happened and are likely to happen if we let them. Getting rid of unrealistically negative thinking is a key element to curing depression and anxiety, and it leads to better outcomes. And that's the core element of psychological research being conducted at the University of Pennsylvania, where cognitive behavioral therapy was developed by Dr. Aaron Beck. Now, how many of you listen to the NPR broadcaster podcast Hidden Brain? A couple people. It had an episode on March 6th titled How Your Beliefs Shape Reality, and that was based largely on the work of psychologist Dr. Jer Clifton. They were doing extensive research on what they call primals. Primals are deep attitudes about the world that affect how we feel and act. And the overarching umbrella belief at the top of your mental hierarchy, under which all these primal beliefs reside, is whether you see the world as a good place or a bad place. Is your life worth living, or is life just meaningless suffering? Do you see the world as a playground or a battleground? Now, within that good-bad umbrella, they've isolated or described 26 primal world belief structures, but they focus on 3 of them. They found 3 main patterns in all human beings across many different cultures, which they label safe, enticing, and alive. The first primal is safe versus dangerous. This is like, is there slack in the universe, or is it out to get you? The second primal belief is enticing or dull. Is your world full of beautiful, interesting, meaningful, funny things that you can go out and find? Or does the world seem dull, barren, boring, ugly, and therefore not worth exploring? Now, the third primal world belief they focus on that should be particularly interesting to you is alive versus mechanistic. And what they mean by this is, do you feel that the world is imbued with intention and purpose that interacts with you and needs your help for an important task? Or do you see the world as a mindless machine that has no special need of you? Do you think everything happens randomly and without purpose, and it's not interacting with you in any special way, and the universe is indifferent to our existence? And Dr. Clifton said, this is perhaps the most fundamental question that all of us have to respond to. Is the world worth existing? Is it a privilege to get to live in this world, or is it more of a curse to have been born here? This isn't just some academic exercise. Their research indicates that these primals affect how we live our lives, how much joy and suffering we experience. And it strikes me that this is really the heart of theology for the 21st century. What sort of world do we live in? Who are we? What's our purpose, if there is one? For this spiritual community, the question is there a way for us to choose lenses through which we view the world that will give us more meaningful, harmonious lives? It might be easier to wrap our heads around this, I think, if we consider two different characters from children's literature, Pollyanna and Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh books. Now let's talk about Pollyanna for a moment. Now, for most people, Pollyanna is a term for a person who's so naively optimistic that they don't really see the world clearly. And Pollyanna, that's become a word used by pessimists to disparage anybody who doesn't share their negative, quote, realistic outlook on life. So I thought to myself, who is this Pollyanna? I'd never read the book, which was a bestseller written in 1913 by Eleanor Potter, a New Hampshire woman, and I had a faint memory of the 1960 Disney movie starring Haley Mills. So I went on to books.google.com, where they have scanned an archive copy of the original printing. It's about 300 pages long, and one evening, thanks to Disney Plus, my wife Ellen and I watched the movie. And I was very surprised by what I found. It turns out Pollyanna isn't all sunshine and flowers. She's had a really hard life. Her father was a missionary preacher way out west, somewhere in a small church that could barely afford to pay him anything. They weren't Unitarians. Pollyanna's clothes were all handmade by the Ladies' Aid Society of the church, and so richer churches like this one in the East would send supplies sealed in barrels to the missionary churches in the West. It's sort of like the Salvation Army or Goodwill today. And a key plot point, Pollyanna is hoping that she'll find a doll in the next missionary barrel from the East. But when it arrives, there's no doll for her, only a pair of crutches. She cried, of course, like any girl would, and her father, the missionary minister, told her there's always something in any sad situation that you can find to be glad about. She could be glad about getting the crutches, he said. He said, think of these crutches and be glad that you don't have to use them. In their hard frontier life, they decided to turn this into a game they called the glad game. And the harder it was in a situation to find anything to be glad about, the more challenging the game. Pollyanna's life gives her way too many opportunities to play the glad game, unfortunately. As the story opens, both her mother and father have died, and she's been shipped in the care of strangers across country from Wyoming or someplace to live in Vermont with her rich spinster Aunt Polly, who she's never met. And when she arrives, Aunt Polly seems to have no empathy for this little girl who's come to live with her. She sees caring for her niece as a duty, not a joyous reunion with her late sister's daughter. And she forbids Pollyanna to say anything about her father because her family disapproved of her mother's marriage to this poor missionary. Now, Aunt Polly is the richest woman in town. She has a mansion and several servants. Yet she puts her orphaned niece up in a bare attic room that's hot in the summer and cold in the winter, with no fireplace, no rugs on the floor, no pictures on the walls or curtains in the windows, even though Aunt Polly has lots of empty, ornate bedrooms in this mansion. Pollyanna, of course, plays the glad game with this situation. She had never had a room of her own before, and now she has one for the first time in her life. Her house out west was just as bare as the attic room, except for what the Ladies' Aid Society could provide. And she doesn't care that there are no pictures are on the wall after she discovers there's this great view out the attic window. Besides, she could be living in an orphanage if she didn't have an aunt to live with. In the book, Pollyanna is aware fully of the bad things and injustices of life. And there are some things she won't play the glad game about, like funerals. She tells the housekeeper who's agreed to play the glad game with her that there are some things that aren't right to play the game about, and I'm sure funerals are one of them. There's nothing in a funeral to be glad about. This from a child who's been to the funerals of her mother, then her father, and then sent to a place she's never been where everyone is a stranger. Now, most of the Pollyanna story isn't about her, though. It's about her effect on the people of this Vermont town she's been sent to. The town is full of crabby, unfriendly people with a sour outlook on life. You know, Vermonters. And Pollyanna surfs across the town like a breath of fresh air. To the other people in town, the fact that she always talks about good things and never about bad things means that she's a goody two-shoes. But that's not the case. Even though Pollyanna has had a really hard life, she's generally happier than most of the people in this Vermont town she's come to. Among the characters are Miss Snow, the cantankerous invalid, and we're not sure if she's really sick or just a hypochondriac, for whom nothing that's ever happened is right. When Pollyanna is sent to bring her some food, the maid says, "If it's Monday, she's bound to say she wished 'twas Sunday, and if you take her jelly, you're pretty sure to hear she wanted chicken. But if you did bring her chicken, she'd just be hankering for lamb broth." Then there's grouchy old Mr. Pendleton, who's wealthy beyond most people's dreams, but also unhappy. He lives in a mansion of stone up on the hill all by himself, and in the movie, he's the kind of old guy who tells kids to get off my lawn. It turns out later, spoiler alert, that he was in love with Pollyanna's mother before she ran off west with the missionary, and he's been a sourpuss ever since. Then there's the town doctor who gives Pollyanna a ride in his buggy. And when she tells the doctor that his must be the happiest profession of all, he's sort of startled. He says, "What? Seeing sick people in misery all day?" To which Pollyanna replies, But doctor, you get to help those people. That must be the happiest thing of all." Another character is the minister of the church in town. He's sick at heart because of the backbiting, scandal, petty grievances, and arguments between the members of his congregation. But Pollyanna knows a lot about the challenges of ministry for an 11-year-old girl because her father was poor, sick, worried, and almost alone in the world. But her father counted how many times in the Bible it says to rejoice and be glad. And he counted 800 of them. There are actually 826. And to rejoice and come in. And Pollyanna tells Reverend Ford, if God took the trouble to tell us 800 times to be glad and rejoice, he must want us to do it some. Pollyanna is an evangelist for the glad game, and eventually she gets the people in this cold Vermont town to look at the positive possibilities, despite the inevitable challenges that life brings. So she's an early predecessor of Norman Vincent Peale's power of positive thinking. And I can't help but speculate that there is some influence of universalism, the positive thinking of its time, on the author of Pollyanna, because when she wrote the book in 1913, that was when, here in New England, universalism influence was at its peak. Near the end of the story, there is an accident that paralyzes Pollyanna. In the book, she's hit by a car, and in the movie, she falls out of a tree. And after she hears the doctors tell Aunt Polly she may never walk again, her optimism finally fails her. She tells her nurse, if I can't walk, how am I ever going to be glad for anything? It's hard to play the glad game when the crutches are meant for you. Naive, bright sunshine, this tale is not. Now it's the time for the people of the town to come and try to cheer her up, telling her what a difference she's made in their lives. At the end of the story, Pollyanna goes to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore to be treated for her spinal injury. And after 10 months, she can only walk a few steps from her bed to the window. But she has regained her old positive outlook, writing to Aunt Polly, "It will be so good just to walk. Why, I'm glad now I lost my legs for a while, for you never know how perfectly lovely legs are until they don't work." This isn't a perspective that says everything's going to be all right. It's not ignoring the hazards of the future. She's not wearing rose-colored glasses that keep her from seeing the world as it is. It's trying to find something in the present moment that's redeeming or can be enjoyed in the face of all those things that are unredeemable and unenjoyable. One writer says that he sees Pollyanna not as a naive child, but rather as a gifted individual with the ability to direct her extreme optimism and good-naturedness for the good towards the manipulating of the negative, worldly, cynical, or disillusioned emotions of the adults that inhabit her life. Doesn't that sound like something a liberal religion ought to do? Direct our optimism and good-naturedness for the good towards manipulating the negative, worldly, cynical, or disillusioned emotions of the adults around us? I fear that we've taken that initial optimism of
Good,
universal
still going.
and have bought into
Sorry,
the
this is
disasters that are forecast
I
for
like
us.
it.
But that's a sermon I'd like to give at General Assembly someday. Not likely. Now, there are some important caveats to Pollyanna's positive life outlook, though. She believes all people have some good in them somewhere, but thankfully she never runs into a psychopath or sociopath who would rather kill her than play the glad game. There's a difference between thinking that there's evil everywhere and believing that evil doesn't even exist. Neither of those attitudes are true. Another deficit of positive thinking that's especially important to those of us who work for social justice is that it makes it too easy to overlook systemic injustices that affect people's ability to overcome their circumstances. I'm skeptical of the New Thought preachers who tell you that everything's under the control of your mind, or that there are miracles to be had if you just pray hard enough. Wishing doesn't always make it so. Having said that, those are minor deficits compared to the power of negative thinking, which is extremely powerful indeed. You might remember from the Winnie the Pooh books the character of Eeyore, the sad, somewhat ignorant old gray donkey who lives in a house of sticks in an area labeled on the map. Eeyore's gloomy place, rather boggy and sad. Eeyore's favorite food is thistles. When Piglet offers him a cheerful good morning, Eeyore responds, "Well, I suppose it's a good morning for some." When Pooh asks him how he is, he says, "I'm not very how. I don't seem to have felt how for a long time." When he's lost his tail, he concludes not that he accidentally left it somewhere, but somebody must have taken it. How like them. Eeyore is disconnected from community, miserable, and in one episode on his birthday, no one has given him presents or a cake with candles. And he says, "Nothing's the matter. We can't all be happy, and some of us aren't. That's all there is to it." He's not eager to go along on adventures with Christopher Robin and Piglet and Tigger, although he generally grudgingly goes along. He doesn't have very high opinion of the other animals in the wood. To quote from Pollyanna again, if you look for the bad, expecting it, you will get it. And Eeyore's inherent pessimism doesn't serve him very well. If it weren't for the other characters like Pooh and Tigger reaching out to him, he wouldn't have much of a life. The effects of negative thinking on your life aren't just emotional, they're practical. If the world's out to get you, why trust anyone to help you? Why take risks? If the world is gray and dull like Eeyore's, and you have no motivation to look for anything better because it doesn't exist. If the world is a machine where everything is predestined, it doesn't matter what you do. On the other hand, maybe there's an advantage to negative thinking. If we teach our kids that the world's a dangerous place, maybe they'll be more cautious and have a better chance of survival. Perhaps. But if they're constantly on alert for threats from every direction, yeah, they won't get mugged, but they're more likely to develop anxiety, high blood pressure, loneliness, and depression. That research at the University of Pennsylvania says that successful, healthy people don't see the world as a constantly dangerous place. And when it comes to fairness, if you think the world is unfair, why work hard? Why make anything if it's just going to be stolen from you? On the other hand, if you think the world is fair, you think, I'll work hard because I'll get rewarded for it eventually. And as I said earlier, the downside of this attitude is you may also think, oh, poor people just didn't work hard enough. You don't see the structures that make some people fail regardless of their efforts. We blame the victim. Anyway, in either case, your world is shaped by the lens that you place over your vision, these primals. The question is, what sets our primals? Is it our life experiences that lead us to believe that the world is safe or dangerous, enticing or dull, alive or mechanical? Well, their research at UP contradicts what we might think. They found that, say, people who live in a very safe suburb, and they compared the attitude to people who live in a dangerous part of the inner city. They found that they're just as likely to believe either that the world is safe or that it's dangerous. And they compared wealthy people with poor people. Wealthy people are just as likely to believe that the world is a place of scarcity as poor people. Now, we used to think that negative beliefs were symptoms of depression. Now we think they cause depression. As they said in this Human Brain podcast, most of us think we see the world as it is, that our beliefs are shaped by our experiences. But actually, our beliefs shape the world for us. And this is one of the reasons why people don't understand each other. We're all looking at the world through different lenses. Changing your primal beliefs isn't easy. It takes work. It's a spiritual practice. The secular way of looking at spiritual practice might be the constant examination and amendment of our core beliefs according to what will actually bring the world the best outcomes, or as Sam Harris would say, the peaks in the moral landscape. The new theology we need to develop is what views of the universe lead to the greatest meaning, understanding, human growth, and well-being. And that's a theology we could all stand behind. Research is still in its infancy about how these 26 other primals develop and how to train our minds to see the world more clearly and see it whole. But while positive thinking alone isn't enough, it's clear we will be better off if we emulate Pollyanna's Zen-like response to life's problems than if we follow Eeyore into the gloomy, sad place. Now, these are interesting ideas, and I think they offer a lot of benefit, not only to us individually, but to society as a whole. Our miscommunication problems, the lenses that keep us from seeing the things the way other people see them. So I encourage everyone, when you get home, to take out your smartphones or your computer, go to your podcatcher and download that Human Brain episode called How Our Beliefs Shape Reality from March 6th. And take an hour while you're doing yard work or driving to work or doing the dishes It'll be well worth your time. If you really want to get into this issue of primals and umbrella beliefs, Google primal beliefs and you'll find myprimals.com, I think is it, and the lead researcher is Jer Clifton. There's some great videos there talking about this research. So I hope that this sermon will be useful to you as we go into the spring and summer, and we will progress onward and upward. May it be so. And in light of that, let's sing our next hymn. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, which is number 211. Now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows. If you have a sorrow that needs the help of this community to carry, or a joy so great that you simply will lift all our hearts by sharing it, now is the time. And Rocky, are you up for microphone duty today? Rocky will bring a microphone to you. And if you're online, raise your virtual hand. There's a little icon that'll raise a hand on the screen so Frank can see, and we'll recognize you. This is not a time for personal or political announcements. We care for each other by being true to the purpose of this time, and we care for each other by our brevity, so please be brief. And we will have a lot of time after the service for conversation and for sharing other announcements. A great joy we feel today is having visitors to All Souls, and so during this time, feel free to enjoy yourself. This is not a requirement. We just would like to welcome you.
He meant to say, feel free to introduce yourself.
Feel free to, what did I say? Introduce yourself and enjoy yourself. Now is the time for welcoming visitors and sharing joys and sorrows. I'd like to start out by recognizing that Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People, he passed away this week, and we also lost one of the great social activists and singers and everything, actors, Harry Belafonte. Raise your hand and Rocky will bring a mic to you.
My name's Andrew Baker. I just want to give a little joy and shout out for this wonderful misty rain we're having right now. And my lettuce and my arugula are up this morning.
I'm Dr. Joyce Young. I lived in Greenfield from 1973 to 1997 when I went to medical school to become a naturopathic physician. And this is an especially meaningful sermon for me because how could I have done all these right sorts of things all through the years and end up severely chemically injured from my medical school, now having developed low vision in January of 2020, and end up with no place to live, living at 60 Wells Street at the homeless shelter. How could this happen to me? And yet, this is a very meaningful sermon because I've realized I've been called a perpetual optimist. And I'm like, this doesn't look very good to me. How could this happen to me? And I realized that the universe has probably sent me to this homeless shelter I'm very different than people at this homeless shelter. And that my presence has been noticed there. I'm very different. Maybe that's why I'm there. Maybe I'm there to be an example. Maybe I'm there to learn what it's like to be homeless in a homeless shelter with all sorts of addictions that I've never experienced in my entire life. Maybe that's why I'm there, so that when I regain my vision, I'm a better doctor. Thank you for this marvelous sermon.
You're
It's
welcome.
very true.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
My name is Tom. On a lighter note, I would like to light a candle of joy. I'm usually pretty spare in giving those candles, but I would like to light a candle of joy in acknowledgement of the value of a mindset of positivity, optimism, and hope. Last night, the Boston Red Sox played the Cleveland Guardians, formerly the Cleveland Indians. The Red Sox had a lead of 6-1, and the relief pitching botched it, and by the ninth inning, the Guardians tied the score 6-6, and they went into extra innings. In the 10th inning, the top of the 10th, the Guardians scored another run and took the lead 7-6. And I said, here we go again. This team is just hopeless. But they came out like gangbusters in the bottom of the 10th and quickly scored 2 runs to lead and to win the game, 8-7. Taught me a lesson. And thank you for reminding me, Dan. Thank you.
So my name's Pam, and I want to thank Dan Tinen for years and years and years of help and service to all of us. So thank you, Dan. Yeah. And I also want to thank the new guy on the block who just showed up last week, who was Dave Jackie, who'd never done a sermon before in his life. And he met for one morning over breakfast with Steve Wilson. And Steve gave him some hints, and he used it. He said, don't plant trees. It was a surprise thing, and people paid attention. And that is a valuable thing, and it has humor, life, because then he talked about the systemic nature of human beings, and we are so systemic in this congregation. We are linked through expressions of support from each other. So thank you, Dan, once again. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I want to light a candle of joy because I got to talk to my son for a nice long time yesterday. He lives in Colorado and he works a lot and he's been very kind to me and supportive, but we don't talk a lot, and so I really enjoyed that. And also I'd like to offer a joy of gratitude for all the lovely daffodils and tulips that are all over the place now that it has rained, and so that's my speech for this week.
I'd like to light a candle of joy for last night's performance by the Amandla Chorus in this room. The first time they had performed live here in several years, and we had about 120 people in this sanctuary, so it was very successful.
Good morning, I'm Mary, and I had two deep sorrows to share. I lost two very good friends this week in Ohio, Bill Hearns and Adam Butts, and I just want to say the experience, strength, and hope, and love, and courage that they shared with me.
Morning, church. I didn't expect to be here today, but Dan, that's great. Little Eeyore. I always liked Eeyore, but Pooh. Pooh especially, but the whole little clan there. But let me see. I'm going to light one candle. My friend Karen, I was talking to her yesterday, and I said, what's going on? And she said, her friend Ellen, now I don't know who that Ellen is, but I know I'm going to choose to call God does, lost her mother and father in a bad car accident. Gone, the two of them. But they were old and having problems, so maybe it wasn't so bad on one level, just the way our human beings look at it, but Spirit, I think, had a different plan. Number two, I just heard of the passing. How many people here have heard of the Valentine's Day Bandit? Come on now. I think Portland, maybe. Here's one here. So, for years, this wonderful human being went out hundreds of Valentines and spread them all through wherever he was in Portland or wherever in Maine, you know. And so he just passed, and they said, it's you! You are the Valentine's Day Bandit. Just think of how much love every year. Nobody knew it was him. He just spread these Valentines. They go, okay. Sometimes, you know, it's the people that are totally silent that do the most good. Let me see. I think I had one more, but Valentine's Day Bandit, my friend's friend that passed. Just a moment of silent and thought for all the people that are struggling in the world in many different ways, whether it's health, whether it's finances, and what I'm grateful to beginning to see is the world coming back to community and letting go gradually, sometimes not willingly, of capitalism. I'm so grateful for community and wholeness and oneness. I see that coming slowly into fruition. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Catherine, and I would like a candle lit for my friend Abdul and Lynn's daughter Lynn, who's in the hospital. And she's in the hospital as a result of years of addiction. She's pretty close to it. And in the realm of the gladness game, my friends Abdul and Lynn were going to be traveling at this time, and instead they're taking care of their daughter in the hospital. And we tried to turn that around a little bit and say, maybe there's a reason you're not on the road right now and traveling, and you've been saved from something really, really harsh or difficult or harmful. So there's the glad game, and thank you, Dan, for that. Thank you.
Frank, are there any online that you'd like to add?
Yeah, we have one from Russ, so just 1 second.
May I go now?
There you go. Yeah, we can hear you, Russ.
You can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Russ.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry. I wanted to be there today, but my blood sugar has been running this morning. Please light a candle of joy for the fact that I can attend the service this way. I've never done this before. And during Julia's playing, the camera behind her, I could see some of the hammers hitting some of the strings in the piano. And that was just fascinating. And I'm glad to be able to be here, even though, dealing with the blood sugar. So thank you.
Anybody else online? Okay. Yeah, Frank.
So basically, I happen to light a candle star because we have members up at the grove leaving, our executive director and our office director are leaving. So yeah, that's kind of rough.
I wonder what's going on. Yeah, I don't see the light on. Maybe the battery's dead or. There's the light. Okay. For those of you, Frank comes to us on Sundays. He works in IT for the Rowe Camp and Conference Center, the Unitarian Universalist campground and conference center up in Rowe.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I come to this building for community. I love the message here, and I also love the community. And I just want to say I was so happy last weekend. Last Sunday, we had a choir, we had a wonderful speaker, we had a full house, and then we went downstairs and had a wonderful community meal catered by Stone Soup. And I just made me so happy. And I'll add that last night's concert here in this space was a wonderful community gathering also. So thank you, community.
Okay. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose. We turn our minds and hearts towards one another, seeking to hold in our hearts all our joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. Amen. And now, would you please join in singing Prayer to Friends, which is a separate piece in the front. Usually, Russ does this. In fact, Russ is not here this morning. We miss it. He makes sure that this Prayer to Friends is in the front of every hymnal for us. So. This day I bring my life, born of hope, born of sand, yearning joy where now there's strife. All I have, all I am, help me We affirm the unfolding renewal of life. Rising from the earth and reaching for the sun, all living creatures shall fulfill themselves. We affirm the steady growth of human companionship. Rising from ancient cradles and reaching for the stars, people the world over shall seek the ways of understanding. We affirm a continuing hope that out of every tragedy, the spirits of individuals shall rise to build a better world. Amen. Go in peace.